I stayed silent during her 20-minute rant. I simply unfolded the property survey and watched 4 to 7 homeowners realize they'd been using my road for free. Picture this. HOA President Patty standing at the podium, waving around a $70,000 bill for my unauthorized road improvements, lecturing 60 neighbors about how I was supposedly destroying their property values. She had a PowerPoint presentation, fake engineering reports, and even brought 3 lawyers to intimidate me into submission. Patty had spent 6 months making my life miserable, measuring my grass with actual rulers, fining me for my daughter's car being improperly parked in my own driveway, and threatening to have my house condemned because I dared to fix dangerous potholes with my own money. What she didn't know was that every single expensive car in that parking lot had driven across my private property to get there. The road she was so worried about? I had inherited it from my uncle, the original developer of the neighborhood. Think about it. What would you do if your HOA fined you for maintaining your own property? Drop a comment with your craziest neighbor story. I guarantee you've got one. Let me back up and introduce myself. My name is Jake Morrison, 52, a retired civil engineer who thought I'd found the perfect quiet neighborhood to rebuild my life. After a messy divorce that left me questioning everything, I bought a modest ranch house in Willowbrook Estates in 2019. The selling points were good schools for my teenage daughter Emma's weekend visits, tree-lined streets, and a seemingly reasonable HOA that actually maintained things. Willowbrook Estates sits like a little suburban island, 4 to 7 homes built in the 1980s and 1990s, connected to the outside world by a single winding road called Maple Grove Lane. When I first moved in, most of the residents were original families, middle-class folks who'd raised their kids there and knew their neighbors' names. But over the past few years, gentrification crept in like ivy on a fence. Tech workers and real estate investors started buying up houses, tearing down gardens to install security cameras, and turning friendly waves from the driveway into complaints on neighborhood apps. Enter Patricia Hendris. Everyone called her Patty, but she was about as sweet as a parking ticket. 48, a real estate agent, she drove a white BMW parked at precisely the same angle every day. She always wore yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, even indoors, as if she were perpetually heading to some very important meeting about being important. Patty moved in during 2020 and immediately appointed herself the neighborhood standards coordinator. Literally, she measured grass height with a ruler. Her husband, Richard, was a quiet tax attorney who seemed to spend most of his time apologizing for his wife. They didn't have kids, which meant Patty had all the time in the world to focus on everyone else's business. The chaos began in spring 2024. After a brutal winter, Maple Grove Lane resembled a moonscape, potholes deep enough to swallow a small dog, asphalt crumbled into gravel. The metallic scrape of car bumpers hitting the damaged pavement became the neighborhood's unofficial soundtrack. Being an engineer, I knew it would only get worse. I sent a polite email to the HOA board offering to coordinate professional repairs. Patty's response arrived within an hour. All modifications require board approval and proper permits. 6 weeks later, no board meeting had been scheduled, and the road kept deteriorating. Mrs. Chen, the sweet 78-year-old 3 houses down, nearly fell into a pothole while getting her mail. That's when I decided enough was enough. I called my contractor buddy Tom, a guy who permanently smelled of diesel fuel and coffee, and we spent a weekend properly filling the worst potholes. High-quality materials, careful preparation, the works. It cost me $3,200 out of my own pocket, but at least people could drive safely again. The neighbors were immediately grateful. Several even offered to reimburse me. I posted before and after photos in our neighborhood Facebook group, hoping it might inspire the board to finally address the road properly. That, it turned out, was my first mistake. Within 48 hours, a crisp certified mail letter landed on my porch at 8 a.m. Patty accused me of unauthorized infrastructure modifications and threatened legal action. She claimed my repairs didn't match HOA aesthetic standards and demanded I remove all materials and restore their original condition. Original condition? You mean the potholes that were literally dangerous? The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Older residents supported me, remembering a time when neighbors helped neighbors. But the newer, wealthier residents sided with Patty. Rules are rules, they said. That's when I realized I'd accidentally triggered a suburban class war. The stale coffee smell at the emergency HOA meeting should have warned me about what was coming next. Patty called an emergency HOA board meeting for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly when working people were actually working. Only 3 of the 5 board members showed up, which apparently counted as a quorum in Patty's world. I walked into the community center meeting room to find Patty set up like she was prosecuting a war crimes trial. She had a PowerPoint titled Neighborhood Infrastructure Violations, a case study. She printed out photos of my roadwork from every possible angle, complete with red arrows pointing to what she called unauthorized modifications. This resident, she said, never using my name, has created serious liability issues and threatens our property values with unsanctioned repairs. She claimed my work didn't meet community aesthetic standards, which was rich, considering I'd used better materials than the original road. The board voted 3-0 to fine me $500 for unauthorized modifications plus $200 per day until the repairs were professionally removed. Apparently, filling dangerous potholes was a crime that required daily punishment. Here's the mini twist. I decided to fight back with facts. At the next scheduled board meeting, I showed up with a full engineering report, traffic count data, safety analysis, and material specifications. The works. The room was packed with neighbors, mostly supportive ones tired of dodging craters on their daily commute. I'm offering to donate this work to the HOA, I said calmly. You just need to accept it retroactively. These repairs exceed county road standards. Patty responded by pulling out her own engineering report. And here's where it gets good. It came from her brother-in-law. His only certifications. Lawn care. His so-called professional assessment was literally written on landscaping company letterhead. But Patty doubled down. She raised my fine to $1,000 plus $500 per day and instituted a new emergency protocol requiring all future repairs to use HOA-approved contractors. Guess who the only approved contractor was? Her husband Richard's golf buddy, who charged 3 times the normal rate. My daughter Emma, 17 and far more tech-savvy than me, helped me create a detailed PowerPoint exposing the fake engineering report. We presented it at the next meeting, and you could hear the collective gasp when we displayed the landscaper's credentials next to what Patty had claimed. 3 board members resigned that night out of sheer embarrassment. But Patty, she scrambled quickly to recruit replacement board members from her wealthy neighbors, promising them property value protection. Within 2 weeks, she had a board packed with her allies, and they doubled down on everything. Not only did they keep the fines, they added fraud investigation fees to my bill. That's when I realized this wasn't really about road repair. This was about control. A small person with a little power was trying to run someone out of the neighborhood simply because they dared to question her authority. Other neighbors started coming to me privately, sharing their own horror stories. Patty had cited people for the wrong shade of beige paint. She measured fence heights with a tape measure. She targeted an elderly veteran for flying his American flag past sundown. This woman was drunk on authority, and I had accidentally become the symbol of resistance to her little suburban dictatorship. Here's something I learned that might help you if you ever face a similar situation. HOAs can require you to post a bond equal to the disputed amount if you want to contest their fines. It's a legal trick designed to bankrupt people into compliance before they can fight back. Always check your state's HOA dispute resolution process before engaging in prolonged fights. Knowing the financial requirements upfront can save you from nasty surprises. By this point, I was facing $3,000 in fines, climbing by $500 every day. The smell of fresh tar from my road repairs had long faded, replaced by the bitter taste of injustice every time I drove over the smooth patches I'd created. But here's what Patty didn't know. I'm an engineer. We don't just fix problems, we solve them systematically. And I was about to start digging into exactly who had the authority to do what in our little neighborhood, because something about this entire situation didn't add up. When an engineer gets curious about property records and legal documents, things tend to get interesting. Patty's harassment campaign kicked into high gear. She started driving past my house multiple times a day in that white BMW, slowing down to take photos of my property like some kind of suburban private investigator. The software of her car window going down became my personal soundtrack of dread. She cited me for grass slightly exceeding the 3.5-inch maximum. Yes, she actually got on her hands and knees with a ruler. She fined me for Emma's car being improperly parked in my own driveway, apparently because it was 6 inches over some invisible line only she could see. Then she reported me to the county for possible unpermitted driveway modifications, even though I hadn't touched my driveway in 5 years. But I wasn't about to take harassment lying down. I installed security cameras and started documenting everything. That's when I discovered something beautiful: selective enforcement. Patty's wealthy friends had identical violations that she completely ignored: wrong paint colors, oversized mailboxes, cars parked the exact same way Emma's was. I created a spreadsheet. Engineers love spreadsheets. It clearly showed a pattern of bias. That's when Mrs. Chen knocked on my door one evening, bringing homemade cookies that smelled like vanilla and courage. She'd been watching the situation unfold and had something to tell me. "Addie tried to make me remove my rose garden," she said quietly, "the one my husband planted 30 years ago before he passed. She said it was non-native and created an excessive maintenance burden." Mrs. Chen's hands shook slightly as she spoke. "But I still have all the original HOA documents from when we moved in. Would you like to see them?" Here's the mini twist that changed everything. Mrs. Chen's late husband had been one of the original HOA founding members. She had copies of every covenant, every amendment, every board meeting minute going back to 1983. And when I spread those HOA documents across my kitchen table, I realized most of Patty's current rules had never been properly voted on. The original HOA had been reasonable: basic rules about not letting your yard turn into a junkyard, keeping noise down after 10 p.m., nothing like the nitpicky regulations about grass height and paint colors that Patty had piled on over the years. Many of these rules were added piecemeal by different boards, often without proper community approval. But I needed to dig deeper. The next weekend, I spent hours at the county recorder's office, tracing property records and utility easements. You know that musty smell of old books and bureaucracy? That became my perfume for about 10 straight hours. That's where I uncovered something interesting about our subdivision's development history. The original developer had retained ownership of several key parcels when the neighborhood was built. Most got sold off over the years, but Maple Grove Lane, the road in question, had a more complicated history. When the developer's company went bankrupt in 1995, their assets were sold at auction to pay creditors. The road ownership transferred to a holding company I'd never heard of. That company dissolved in 2001, and its assets were transferred to Morrison Development, LLC. Same last name as mine. Same last name as my Uncle Bob, who had been a small-time property investor before he died in 2018. I rushed home and began digging through the boxes of paperwork Uncle Bob had left me. Stuff I'd been meaning to organize for years. Somewhere in that pile of yellowed documents and musty folders was a deed that would change everything. Meanwhile, Patty escalated her campaign. My fines hit $8,500 and were climbing daily. She threatened to place a lien on my house and scheduled a neighborhood standards hearing with county officials. Her plan was clear: bankrupt me into submission or have my property condemned. But while she plotted my destruction, I had the biggest holy crap moment of my adult life. Buried in Uncle Bob's estate paperwork was a deed to Maple Grove Lane, a private roadway easement. Every car that entered our neighborhood, including Patty's precious BMW, was driving across property I had inherited. Here's a knowledge nugget that might blow your mind: private road easements are completely different from public rights-of-way. When you own a private road, you can control who uses it, set maintenance requirements, even charge fees. Always research actual property boundaries and easements before assuming roads are public. Many subdivisions have surprising private ownership structures that can completely change your legal standing. I sat in my kitchen that night, holding the deed in hands, shaking with disbelief and righteous fury. Patty had been fining me for maintaining my own road. The next morning, I called a real estate attorney to confirm what I was seeing. 2 days later, sitting in her office that smelled of leather-bound law books and expensive coffee, I got the confirmation that made my heart race. "But Morrison," she said, "you definitely own that road. The title chain is clear, and you've been legally responsible for its maintenance all along. The HOA never had any authority to regulate it." But I didn't immediately march over to Patty's house to wave the deed in her face. Patty was about to give me something much better than a quick victory. She raised my total fines to $25,000 and scheduled an emergency community meeting to discuss the problem resident. She even invited the local TV news crew to cover what she called a neighborhood dispute. The meeting was packed. Over 40 neighbors showed up, plus the Channel 7 news team with bright lights that made everything feel like a small-town congressional hearing. Patty had prepared a 20-minute PowerPoint about maintaining community standards, complete with enlarged photos of my roadwork labeled as an authorized modification. "This residence defiance threatens everyone's property values," she declared to the cameras, gesturing at me like I was some common criminal. "We need community support for necessary enforcement action." I sat quietly in the back row, taking notes and letting her dig her hole deeper. The tension in the room was palpable. Neighbors shifted nervously in their plastic chairs, avoiding eye contact, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Here's the mini twist. Instead of defending myself immediately, I requested permission to respond to her accusations. Patty, probably expecting some kind of broken apology, smugly agreed. I walked to the front carrying a folder of documents and unfolded a surveyor's map on the table. The room went dead silent except for the low hum of the news camera. "Before we discuss road violations," I said calmly, "let's clarify who actually owns this road." The expression on Patty's face when I showed the deed was priceless. Pure shock, like someone had just told her Santa Claus was real and he was suing her for trespassing. I explained everything clearly. I had inherited the road from Uncle Bob. Every resident had been using my private property for access, and I'd been maintaining it at my own expense for years. The county official who had attended the meeting asked to examine the documents and confirmed they looked authentic. "The HOA never had authority to regulate this private road," I continued. "I've been subsidizing the neighborhood's infrastructure while being fined for improving my own property." Patty's desperate response was to claim the documents were fake or irrelevant. She insisted the HOA had established authority and threatened to have the county investigate me for fraud. But you could see in her eyes that she knew the game had completely changed. The reasonable neighbors immediately understood what this meant. Several approached me afterward, thanking me for maintaining the road and apologizing for staying silent during Patty's harassment campaign. About 15 residents left with Patty, but the majority stayed to hear my proposal. "I'm offering a Maple Grove Road cooperative agreement," I said. "Residents pay a modest monthly fee for professional maintenance. I retain ownership but commit to community input. We end the current fines and legal threats, and everyone gets a properly maintained road." Patty refused to consider any compromise. She stormed out, screaming that this wasn't over and threatening to sue me for blackmail. Her core supporters followed, but Mrs. Chen immediately stepped up to organize an information meeting for interested residents. The local news ran the story that night. HOA road ownership dispute reveals private property rights. The video went viral on social media, with comments overwhelmingly supporting me. Patty's threats and behavior made her look completely unreasonable next to my calm, factual presentation. Here's another knowledge nugget that saved me thousands in legal fees. HOAs cannot self-enforce liens without actual court judgments. Many HOA threats are legally toothless bluffs designed to intimidate homeowners who don't know their rights. If your HOA threatens liens, always demand to see actual court orders. Many associations rely on fear tactics rather than legitimate legal authority. I gave the community 1 week to respond to my proposal. Within 3 days, I'd received calls from over 20 interested neighbors. Mrs. Chen organized a road cooperative information meeting, while Patty held a competing defense strategy meeting with her remaining supporters. The battle lines were drawn, but for the first time since this mess started, I held all the cards. But owning the road was just the tip of the iceberg. When I really dug into Uncle Bob's paperwork, spreading everything across my dining room table like a property detective, I discovered something that made road ownership look like small potatoes. Uncle Bob hadn't just owned the road. His company, Morrison Development LLC, had originally developed the entire Willowbrook Estate subdivision back in the early 1980s. Every lot, every utility easement, every carefully planned curve in our suburban paradise, he had designed it all. The road wasn't just private property. It had been specifically designed as a private access point to maximize the value of every lot in the neighborhood. It was never intended to be public or HOA controlled. Uncle Bob had kept ownership intentionally, both for liability protection and to maintain quality standards. My real estate attorney explained the full scope of what I'd inherited. As the road owner, I could legally control access, set usage rules, and even charge maintenance fees. The only restriction was that I couldn't suddenly strand existing residents without reasonable notice. But essentially, I had unlimited authority over my property. Here's the financial reality that blew my mind. Over 30 years, road maintenance had cost approximately $180,000. My recent $3,200 repair job had increased property values by an estimated $15,000 per home. Simple math, the neighborhood's 47 homes had collectively benefited by over $700,000 from my work alone. Mrs. Chen filled in the historical context that made everything make sense. The original HOA had been genuinely cooperative, focused on basic community maintenance and neighborly relations, nothing like the bureaucratic nightmare Patty had created. Uncle Bob used to coordinate roadwork through HOA communications, and everyone chipped in fairly. "Your uncle was a good man," Mrs. Chen told me over tea that tasted like jasmine and justice. "He never made anyone feel like they owed him, even though legally they did." Patty's regime, by contrast, represented a hostile takeover of what used to be a real community. The power shift in my brain hit like flipping on floodlights. I realized I'd been approaching this completely backward. I wasn't just a resident subject to HOA rules. I was a property owner whose asset was being regulated by his own customers. Those 47 homes depended entirely on my private road for access, and I'd been too polite to acknowledge my leverage. But here's what really hit me. I had been subsidizing these people's infrastructure while being fined for the privilege. The HOA budget showed zero allocation for road maintenance because the residents had been freeloading on my inheritance for years. I made a strategic decision that night. I could have gone nuclear immediately, posted private road, no trespassing signs, and locked down access until people paid up. But that's not who I am. I wanted to solve the problem fairly, not destroy the neighborhood out of spite. My plan was simple: educate the community about the true ownership structure, offer a reasonable compromise, and escalate to access restrictions only if harassment continued. This was about respect and fairness, not revenge. I scheduled a professional surveyor to mark the exact road boundaries and ordered proper signage indicating private road status. I researched insurance implications and consulted a traffic lawyer about proper procedures. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The emotional turning point for me was realizing I could actually protect other neighbors from Patty's tyranny, Mrs. Chen's rose garden, the veteran's flag, all the petty harassment. I had the power to end it by removing Patty's authority over the road that made her little kingdom possible. I shifted from defensive victim to empowered property owner. But with great power comes great responsibility, and I was determined to use this leverage wisely. The next week felt like preparing for the most important presentation of my life. My attorney walked me through every detail of private road owner rights and responsibilities. I could legally post signage, control hours, restrict certain vehicles, and charge maintenance fees, but I had to provide reasonable access to existing residents and couldn't suddenly strand anyone without proper legal notice. I hired a professional surveyor to confirm the exact boundaries. Every inch mattered if this was going to court. Watching him work with that precise electronic equipment, beeping and measuring while neighbors pretended not to stare from their windows, felt like drawing battle lines with scientific precision. The traffic engineer I consulted calculated fair usage fees based on actual vehicle counts. He sat at the road entrance for 3 days, clicking one of those handheld counters every time a car passed. The metallic click, click, click became the soundtrack of data gathering. His conclusion: $50 per month per household would more than cover professional maintenance, snow removal, and emergency repairs. Emma turned into my secret weapon for community outreach. She created a neighborhood Facebook group called Fair HOA Governance and started documenting the harassment timeline with photos and screenshots. My daughter has a gift for making complex legal matters sound reasonable. Her posts began attracting supporters I didn't even know I had. "Dad, look at this," she said, showing me her laptop screen filled with comments. "Mrs. Peterson says Patty fined her for having the wrong mailbox numbers. Mr. Garcia got cited for his kids' chalk drawings on their own driveway. This woman is insane." I designed an educational presentation explaining the road ownership history, complete with maps, photos, and a simple FAQ. My engineering background came in handy. I knew how to make technical information digestible. The key was showing people this wasn't about money or revenge. It was about ending the harassment and creating a sustainable solution. The financial analysis was eye-opening. I calculated that over the years, I had essentially been subsidizing the neighborhood's infrastructure to the tune of about $150 per household per month. My proposed $50 maintenance fee was actually a bargain compared to typical HOA road assessments. Mrs. Chen introduced me to other longtime residents who had been quietly suffering under Patty's regime. Tom, the contractor, offered to donate materials and labor if needed. My attorney continued providing guidance on legal procedures, and even the traffic engineer offered to testify about professional road standards if it came to that. My contingency planning covered every scenario I could imagine. If education failed, I would escalate to formal usage agreements. If harassment continued, I could restrict access during specific hours. If legal threats persisted, I could countersue for harassment and defamation. The nuclear option, complete access restriction, was legally possible but would require careful coordination with emergency services. Here's a knowledge nugget that could save you money if you're ever dealing with shared infrastructure. Private road maintenance cooperatives can actually provide tax advantages when properly structured. Shared infrastructure costs may qualify for certain business deductions. When facing private road disputes, research cooperative ownership structures and tax implications. Sometimes financial incentives motivate better solutions than legal threats. Timing was crucial. I decided to wait for Patty's next escalation before revealing my full hand. This would maximize impact and give the community a clear choice between her authoritarian approach and my cooperative solution. I practiced staying calm under pressure, knowing Patty would likely react explosively. My goal was to focus on solutions, not blame, and give the community a real chance to choose cooperation over conflict. Psychological preparation was just as important as the legal prep. Some level of conflict was unavoidable. Patty had built her entire neighborhood identity around controlling others, and she wouldn't give that up easily. But I also prepared for the possibility that this could heal the community. If we could establish a fair, transparent system for road maintenance, it might become a model for handling other shared expenses. Maybe we could even restore some of the neighborly cooperation Mrs. Chen remembered from the early days. The surveyor finished his work on Thursday, planting small flags every 50 feet along the road boundaries. The sharp smell of spray paint marking property lines mixed with the scent of honeysuckle from Mrs. Chen's garden, a strange combination of legal precision and natural beauty. Friday morning, I had professional signs ready to install. Private road, Morrison Development LLC owner, authorized access only, usage agreements required. But I held off. I wanted to give diplomacy one more chance. Sometimes, when you hold all the cards, the most powerful move is letting your opponent make the next mistake. Patty made that mistake faster than I expected. Monday morning, I found a share of sale notice posted on my front door, the thick legal-sized paper crinkling ominously in the morning breeze. She was actually trying to force the sale of my house to collect her imaginary fines. But her arrogance went even further. She called the local news station claiming victory over the problem resident and scheduled a press conference to announce her successful enforcement action. She was so drunk on perceived power that she advertised her overreach to the entire county. I said nothing publicly, just let her dig her hole deeper while quietly preparing my nuclear option. My attorney filed a motion to dismiss the lien. Turns out, you can't just declare debts and force property sales without actual court judgments. But I didn't announce that victory yet. The surveyor's stakes were still planted along the road boundaries like little flags of impending doom. I had the private road signs ready in my garage, but I wanted Patty to commit fully to her course of destruction before revealing my trump card. Meanwhile, the community was fracturing. Several neighbors approached me privately with apologies and their own horror stories. Mr. Garcia told me Patty had threatened to fine him for his kids drawing with chalk on their own driveway. Mrs. Peterson got cited for having the wrong mailbox numbers, even though they'd been there for 15 years. She's lost her mind, Mrs. Peterson whispered to me at the grocery store, glancing around like Patty might be hiding behind the cereal boxes. But we're all scared to speak up because she retaliates against anyone who crosses her. Here's the mini twist that showed just how desperate Patty was getting. Emma's social media detective work uncovered that Patty's husband, Richard, was facing an ethics investigation. His law practice was accused of overcharging HOA clients and potentially arranging kickbacks with preferred contractors. Patty was using her HOA presidency to generate business for Richard's firm, creating a massive conflict of interest. The same emergency protocols requiring expensive approved contractors funneled money directly to him. The inflated fines and legal threats generated more billable hours for his practice. I held on to this information. Sometimes, the best weapon is the one you don't use yet. Patty's media blitz backfired spectacularly. Her interview about maintaining community standards made her look petty and vindictive, especially when she claimed I represented a property value threat while standing next to the beautifully maintained road I had fixed with my own money. Local small business owners started reaching out to support me. They had experienced similar petty authority abuse from city councils and permit officers. Tom, the contractor, offered to organize other tradespeople to help with road maintenance. A local restaurant owner volunteered to cater the next community meeting for free. Meanwhile, the social media battle was heating up. Emma's Fair HOA governance group had grown to over 200 members, including people from neighboring communities sharing their own HOA horror stories. Patty's supporters created a competing property standards group, but their posts only made them look more unreasonable. Then Patty made her biggest mistake yet. She organized a petition to remove the problem resident and began spreading rumors about my personal life and finances. She told people I was possibly laundering money through fake road repairs and suggested I was behind on my mortgage payments. The whisper campaign was the final straw. When you attack someone's character based on lies, you cross from petty harassment into something much more serious. I made my decision. Friday evening, I sent a simple email to every household in the neighborhood, community meeting, Sunday 2 p.m., important information about road ownership. No threats, no accusations, just a calm invitation to learn the truth. Patty responded by scheduling her own competing meeting for the same time, calling it Emergency Action Against Problem Resident. She even invited county officials and local media, planning to publicly humiliate me and possibly have me arrested over whatever charges she could dream up. The stage was set for the final confrontation. I had my attorney on standby, the surveyor ready with boundary documentation, and a folder full of evidence about Patty's harassment campaign and her husband's ethics issues. Most importantly, I had the road ownership deed in my briefcase along with professional signs ready to install the moment I chose to end the charade. Sunday was going to be very interesting, and this time, I wasn't going to let Patty control the narrative. Sunday arrived with a kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel like destiny. Both meetings were scheduled for 2 p.m. at the community center, Patty's emergency action versus my simple informational session about road ownership. I arrived 30 minutes early with my attorney, the surveyor, and a briefcase full of documentation. The parking lot was already filling with cars, and neighbors were visibly choosing sides based on which entrance they used. The tension was thick enough to cut with a surveyor stake. Patty had gone full drama queen. She set up a projector, invited the Channel 7 news crew again, and somehow convinced a county code enforcement officer and a sheriff's deputy to attend. Her plan was obvious: publicly humiliate me or have me arrested on live television. The room was packed, over 60 people, the largest gathering in neighborhood history. Patty had claimed the podium and was in full performance mode when I walked in. She had prepared another PowerPoint titled Protecting Our Community from Fraudulent Residents. For 20 minutes, she ranted about my unauthorized road modifications, showing enlarged photos of my work and claiming my defiance threatened everyone's property values. She even brought props, a ruler for measuring grass height and printed copies of fabricated violations she had invented. This resident, she declared, pointing directly at me like I was a war criminal, has shown complete disregard for our community standards. Today, we vote to ban him from all common areas and pursue criminal charges for fraud and property destruction. The applause was scattered and awkward. You could feel the room's mood shifting as people realized just how unhinged this had become. When Patty finally finished her theatrical performance, she smugly offered me a chance to respond, probably expecting a desperate plea for mercy. Instead, I stood calmly, walked to the front of the room, and placed my surveyor's boundary map on the table where everyone could see it. Before we discuss road violations, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, let's clarify who actually owns the road we're talking about. The twist that ended everything unfolded before their eyes. I displayed the original development deed and inheritance documentation, showing that Maple Grove Lane had never been public property. Every resident, including Patty, had been using my private road for access without permission or payment. I had inherited this road from my uncle, the developer who built the entire subdivision in the 1980s. For the past 5 years, I continued, I've been maintaining your access route at my own expense while being fined for improving my own property. The county official examined the documents carefully. The surveyor confirmed the boundaries. Even the sheriff's deputy looked increasingly uncomfortable, realizing Patty had called him to intervene in a civil property dispute that was entirely outside his jurisdiction. Patty's response was pure desperation. She insisted my documents were fabricated, that I was running some elaborate scam, and demanded the county investigate me for fraud. But her eyes betrayed the truth. She knew the game was over. I offered my reasonable solution one final time, a road cooperative where residents would pay modest monthly fees for professional maintenance. I would retain ownership but commit to community input. Fair, transparent, and beneficial for everyone. Patty's meltdown was spectacular. She refused any compromise, screaming that I was blackmailing the community and threatening to sue anyone who participated in my so-called extortion scheme. She actually used the word extortion to describe asking people to help pay for maintaining the road they used every day. When she realized the room wasn't buying her hysteria, she stormed out with her car supporters, yelling that this wasn't over and threatening to expose the situation to the state attorney general. The door slammed behind her, echoing through the suddenly quiet room like the end of a very long, very absurd war. Mrs. Chen immediately stood up and began organizing the reasonable neighbors who wanted to discuss the cooperative proposal. About 35 households expressed serious interest. The county official confirmed everything appeared legally proper and suggested we work out the details privately. The news crew interviewed both sides afterward. Patty's on-camera rant about fraudulent residents and property theft made her look completely unhinged, while my calm explanation of inheritance and fair cost sharing came across as completely sensible. That night, the story went viral on local social media, with overwhelming support and dozens of people sharing their own HOA horror stories, praising me for finding a fair solution. But the real victory was walking outside after the meeting and seeing neighbors talking to each other again, instead of hiding behind curtains and avoiding eye contact. For the first time in months, Willowbrook Estates felt like a community instead of a war zone. I thought the Sunday meeting had ended things, but Patty had one more card to play. She set a Friday 5 p.m. deadline, demanding I cease all fraudulent claims or face full legal consequences. Her plan was to rally her remaining supporters for one final confrontation. Friday evening, I arrived at the community center parking lot with my attorney, the surveyor, and a stack of professional Morrison Development LLC private road signs ready to install. The setting sun cast long shadows across the asphalt as both factions gathered for what everyone knew would be the final showdown. Patty had organized what she called a Save Our Neighborhood rally. Her supporters held handmade signs reading "Stop the Road Bully" and "Protect Our Rights." She had brought her husband Richard and 3 of his lawyer friends, clearly planning to intimidate me with sheer legal firepower. The Channel 7 news crew was present again, along with a reporter from the county newspaper who'd heard about the viral HOA dispute. A sheriff's deputy stood by to maintain order, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, dealing with actual crimes. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, stepped forward to facilitate the discussion as our neighborhood's unofficial elder stateswoman. The jasmine from her perfume mixed with the crisp autumn air, tension, and the faint sweat of roughly 50 nervous neighbors. I presented my road cooperative proposal one final time: $40 per month per household for professional maintenance, transparent accounting, community input on major decisions, and a 5-year rate lock. Compared to typical HOA road assessments, it was an incredible bargain. Patty's counterattack was pure theater. She claimed my ownership was just a legal technicality and insisted the community had established rights through decades of use. Her voice shrilled higher and higher as she argued that I was trying to steal their road and extort honest families. "This man," she screamed, pointing at me as if I was some kind of monster, "is holding our entire neighborhood hostage. He's demanding we pay him for the privilege of driving to our own homes." That's when Tom, the contractor, stepped up with the perfect reality check. He explained the actual costs of road maintenance, showed photos of the deterioration before my repairs, and calculated how much money I had personally saved everyone over the years. Jake has been subsidizing this entire neighborhood, Tom said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who actually knows construction. That road would have cost $50,000 to fix properly. He did it for $3,000 and asked for nothing. I made my final offer, reducing the fee to $40 per month and including winter snow removal. I'm giving everyone until Sunday to decide, I said. After that, I'll be installing private road signage and requiring usage agreements for all vehicles. That's when Patty played her nuclear card. She announced that if anyone signed my extortion contract, she would personally sue them for conspiracy to commit fraud. She claimed she had found a way to build an alternate access road and insisted residents didn't need my criminal highway. The county official, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. There are no available easements for alternate access. The surrounding properties are privately owned with no right-of-way provisions. The cost would exceed $2 million, plus environmental permits, and it would take 3 to 5 years at minimum. Patty's face went through about 6 shades of red as she realized her bluff had been called publicly and on camera. I don't care what it costs, she screamed. We will not be held hostage by this fraud. That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. Mrs. Hendris, I said calmly, you've spent 6 months fining me for maintaining my own property while your husband's law firm collected fees from every HOA enforcement action. You've harassed elderly residents, targeted families with children, and turned this neighborhood into a war zone. The only fraud here is your abuse of power. The crowd went dead silent. Even the news cameras seemed to focus more intently, capturing every detail of her unraveling. Her supporters arrived holding handmade signs that read "Stop the Road Bully" and "Protect Our Rights." She had brought her husband Richard and 3 of his lawyer friends, clearly intending to intimidate me into backing down through sheer legal firepower. Channel 7's news crew showed up again, along with a county newspaper reporter who had caught wind of the viral HOA dispute. A sheriff's deputy stood by to maintain order, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else handling actual crimes. Mrs. Chen, bless her heart, stepped forward to facilitate the discussion as the neighborhood's unofficial elder stateswoman. The sweet smell of her jasmine perfume drifted through the crisp autumn air, mixing with the sweat of about 50 nervous neighbors. I presented my road cooperative proposal one final time. $50 per month per household for professional maintenance, transparent accounting, community input on major decisions, a 5-year rate lock. Compared to typical HOA road assessments, it was actually a bargain. Patty's counterattack was pure theater. She declared my ownership a mere legal technicality, claiming that decades of community use gave residents established rights. Her voice climbed higher and shriller as she accused me of trying to steal their road and extort honest families. This man, she shrieked, pointing at me as though I were a monster, is holding our entire neighborhood hostage. He's demanding we pay him just for the privilege of driving to our own homes. That's when Tom, the contractor, stepped up with a perfect reality check. He explained the actual costs of road maintenance, showed before and after photos of the deterioration, and calculated how much money I had personally saved the community over the years. Jake's been subsidizing this whole neighborhood, Tom said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who truly understood construction. That road would have cost $50,000 to fix properly. He did it for $3,000 and asked for nothing. I made my final offer, reducing the fee to $40 per month and including winter snow removal. I'll give everyone until Sunday to decide, I said. After that, I'll be installing private road signage and requiring usage agreements for all vehicles. That's when Patty played her nuclear card. She announced that if anyone signed what she called my extortion contract, she would personally sue them for conspiracy to commit fraud. She claimed she had discovered a way to build an alternate access road so the neighborhood wouldn't need my criminal highway. The county official, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. There are no available easements for alternate access. The surrounding properties are privately owned with no right-of-way provisions. The cost would exceed $2 million, plus environmental permits, and it would take 3 to 5 years at minimum. Patty's face went through 6 shades of red as her bluff collapsed, publicly and on camera. I don't care what it costs, she screamed. We will not be held hostage by this fraud. That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. Mrs. Hendris, I said calmly. You've spent 6 months fining me for maintaining my own property while your husband's law firm collected fees from every HOA enforcement action. You've harassed elderly residents, targeted families with children, and turned this neighborhood into a war zone. The only fraud here is your abuse of power. The crowd went dead silent. Even the news cameras seemed to focus more intently. I'm offering a fair solution that benefits everyone, I continued. But if you prefer to spend $2 million building a road to avoid paying $40 a month, that's your choice. Just remember, you'll still need to cross my property to reach your construction site. The informal vote was swift and decisive. 35 households supported the cooperative agreement. 8 were undecided. Only 6, Patty's core group, rejected it outright. Saturday morning, I installed professional signage, private road, authorized access only. Signs went up at both ends of Maple Grove Lane with a 30-day grace period for current residents to finalize usage agreements. Patty tried one last desperate stunt, organizing neighbors to tear down the signs and calling police to report vandalism of public property. The sheriff's deputy who responded glanced at my ownership documents and politely explained that I had every legal right to post signs on my own land. That weekend's media coverage told the story clearly: a calm, reasonable property owner offering fair solutions versus a hysterical woman making impossible demands. Public opinion wasn't even close. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates is unrecognizable. The Maple Grove Road Cooperative is officially incorporated with 37 participating households paying their fees through a simple online system. The road has never looked better. Professional maintenance, proper drainage, and even decorative plantings along the edges. Patty's reign of terror ended exactly as expected. She lost the HOA presidency in an emergency election 3 weeks after our showdown. Once residents realized they no longer had to fear retaliation, they voted for sanity. Richard's law practice collapsed after a county ethics investigation uncovered systematic overcharging and kickback schemes. Within 6 months, they quietly listed their house and moved to another state. The ripple effects have been incredible. I receive emails from homeowners across the country facing similar HOA abuse, asking for advice. The local news did a follow-up story on HOA reform, and the county is now considering new oversight requirements for community associations. Our case has been referenced in multiple property rights lawsuits as an example of how private road cooperatives can succeed. But the real victory? Seeing Mrs. Chen's rose garden in full bloom again. No longer afraid of citation letters, she organized a neighborhood welcome committee that actually welcomes new residents instead of terrorizing them. Our annual road maintenance meeting has turned into a community social event where neighbors plan block parties and coordinate babysitting swaps. Property values have increased by an average of $12,000 per home, and the cooperative has built up a healthy reserve fund for future repairs. The psychological transformation has been even greater than the financial one. People wave to each other again. Kids play in the street without parents worrying about violation notices. Emma's Facebook group has evolved into genuine community organizing for positive projects. I never set out to become a community activist. But this experience taught me that sometimes ordinary people must stand up to bullies, even when it's uncomfortable. I learned the power of documentation, patience, and coalition building. Most importantly, I discovered that principled resistance can create positive change when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. We've even established the Fair HOA Advocacy Fund, using surplus cooperative funds to provide legal resources for homeowners facing abuse. It partners with a local legal aid society to host workshops on property rights. 3 neighboring communities have already adopted similar cooperative models after seeing our success. The legal precedent we set has helped resolve other private road disputes through mediation instead of costly lawsuits. Local government has updated subdivision regulations for clearer disclosure of road ownership. Even HOA management companies are now emphasizing transparency and resident rights in training programs. My favorite outcome, though, is watching Emma, now a college freshman studying public policy, use this experience in her coursework on grassroots organizing. She's written papers on how ordinary citizens can effectively challenge institutional abuse, and she credits our road war with inspiring her career path. Just last week, A homeowner from the next county called me about an HOA board monopolizing pool maintenance contracts while taking kickbacks. Residents face massive special assessments while board members profit. I'm meeting with them next weekend to share our documentation strategies and cooperative model. Next month, at our annual road maintenance meeting, Mrs. Chen is organizing a neighborhood potluck. Tom is donating materials for decorative stonework at the entrance. We voted to add bike lanes and improve lighting. This fall, we're planning a small festival to celebrate our second anniversary. This is what community looks like when people choose cooperation over control, transparency over corruption, and fairness over fear. So here's my challenge to you. If you're facing HOA abuse, petty authoritarians, or anyone using power to make your life miserable, fight back. Document everything. Know your rights. Build alliances. Don't let bullies win through intimidation. Drop a comment and share your own HOA nightmare story. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be pushed around by power-hungry neighbors. And if you want to see more stories of ordinary people standing up to institutional bullies, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to be a victim.